Welcome to ED 621C Module 11, Designing Traditional Test Items. For this module, you're going to be needing your unit again, and you're also going to be needing some student work, which I'll get to toward the end of this screencast and explaining. So in this module, you're going to be developing a bank of traditional test items for your unit and as practice for developing different types of test items per Nolan and Taylor book. So why is it important to know how to develop traditional classroom assessments? Because you will eventually need to plan, design, build, and evaluate tests that truly assess what students want to learn. If you remember, we've intermittently talked about our professional eye. Not every published curriculum you will encounter provides adequately designed or targeted assessments. At best, tests provide opportunities for reflection and reteaching, and at worst, they provide accountability for coverage. If you're designing your own curriculum, you will need some objective measures of how students are progressing with the content, and that is purportedly what traditional test items give you. And each type has a particular purpose. If you want to know what your students learned in relationship to your learning targets, you must either create or select assessment items that will provide evidence of what students have learned. And we've talked about this with GRASPs and the rubrics and even in ED 621A and B. But now we're really digging into actual test items. Poorly written or invalid test items will give you and your students poor information and make it hard to adjust instruction to meet students' real needs. You may have seen something like this in other classes, the relationship between learning goals, instruction, and assessment. So your learning goals, your identified results, what you want to have happen, lead you to your learning activities and your planning experiences and instruction. And actually this arrow should be like recursive, going both ways. And your assessment strategies are how you determine that they've learned what you want them to learn. And then they can understand and apply it. Also, as you know, the assessment strategies provide a foundation for instruction, so it can go the other direction as well, always with the learning goals in mind. So, important tips for building a test. Plan, plan, plan before instruction, so you know what you're instructing toward. Test maps are for individual tests with multiple types of items. And in Taylor and Nolan, there's a very nice and complete test map, which we're not doing in this particular module. It is something that you might do well to consider because it uses a variety of different assessments, not just the traditional test items, but also performance tasks and also other types of performance and assessment opportunities. Assessment plans are the guides for the unit, the quarter, the semester, however you're using them. They are based directly on your learning objectives and instruction, so they're the foundation for your instruction, but they're the basis for the objectives. They are intimately related, as you now know. So you want to choose the best types of assessments to get at what the students know based on what you're trying to teach them. Presentation is everything. So these are just some technical tips. Space, organization, the level of language used, and even font size and style are important. And I will recommend that for all students up through grade 8, you use a size 14 font. For the little guys, you even use a bigger font because they're still getting that visual discrimination piece developmentally, and so they need a larger font when you use print text. But a size 14 font takes away some of the tension and difficulty students have to focus on text and keep the space simple and clear and not cluttered. As I said, 14 to 16 font is what you should use. Keep in mind the time needed to take the test, and sometimes you need to time yourself to take the test before you give it to the students so you have a good idea of what kind of pacing you need. And keep the format the same for similar test items so that if you're doing multiple choice, it always looks the same even if the content is different. If you're doing matching, it always looks the same even if the content is different, even if you switch out between using text and using pictures. You want the format the same. so the students don't have to guess. Types of test items to build. These are the kinds that you're going to be making for this class. When you create your test item bank, include at least 3 items per type for present and future use. Multiple choice items, short answer, matching test items, true false items, and completion items. You're making a test item bank, and so each level you're going to make the same type of test 3 times, but it's going to be the same content, the same intention, with different, same content area, not the same content. And it is for the purpose, when you have a test item bank, you can set up pre and post tests so that they measure more or less the same thing. You want that validity going, or reliability going, and validity. And at the same time, they don't have the same prompts, so students aren't getting used to answering the same question again and again, which then leads to test wiseness, and you don't want that to happen. You want to get authentic responses. Authentic input leads to authentic output. I'm not sure why there are multiple rocks. Maybe he's put rocks in his test machine. So of those type of tests, these are why you would use them. For learning objectives that can be appropriately assessed through test items, so understand that not all of them are, use this table to decide what types of items to create for each tested learning objective. So if you want just recognition and recall of facts, if you're thinking of Bloom here, right, or Krathwohl, you can use multiple choice items, short answer items, sentence completion items, true false items, and matching. So across the top, you have the five types of test items that will get you recognition and recall of facts. Simple application of knowledge, the same set of tests. Simple comprehension of information, notice they are different. You can still get to comprehension with multiple choice and definitely short answer. Close items are designed for comprehension. They're not designed for vocabulary knowledge. In other words, don't use a close item test to test if they know their vocabulary words. That's not what they're for. Simple application of skills, same. With comprehensive information, true, false, and matching can also work. For application, you get more narrow and you're moving toward the other side of this group of types of tests towards essay, performance, and multiple choice and short answer. So there's like, these require more extended response, and these require less extended response and more concrete, direct, fixed responses. So demonstration or application of conceptual understanding, you're getting more into the extended response items here. Demonstration of a component of a larger authentic performance. An authentic performance immediately takes away items such as multiple choice. So you've got essay, performance, and short answer questions for that. Analysis of documents, data, or other information. Again, extended responses and multiple choice, because you can distinguish what would be a correct use of a type of analysis of data or not. Evaluation of original documents, data, and other information. You're looking more extended responses. Interpretation of text, graphic, or other stimuli, same. Multi-step applications of concepts, knowledge, and skills. Performance tasks, and this is what your culminating performance task was. And so it is not a traditional test item. So what we're really looking at for the purposes of this particular module are looking at these here. These are not so much extended responses. Short answer items are limited extended response. Multiple choice items can be used for just almost everything, right? As can short answer. So this is just a gauge for you to use when you're looking at what kind of information you're going to look for when you create your test items. You're looking at Bloom and Krathwohl, always thinking that it's okay to look for recall, but you want to really access that higher order thinking. Beware of the what question, list question, how many question, who questions. Sometimes you need them, but you really want to look at student understanding. If you remember the 6 facets of understanding, can they apply it? Do they have empathy? And those 6 facets, which I don't have memorized. How many years did the Civil War last? Well, I could say 5. I'm not sure if that's right. How did the Battle of Gettysburg affect the outcome of the Civil War? That requires higher level thinking. It also requires a completely different type of response. The first one is not only short answer, but it's a one number response, which requires only that somebody can recall the fact. Is that important? Does it show you that they understand anything about the Civil War other than it lasted how many years? How did the Battle of Gettysburg affect the outcome of the Civil War? However, it requires the students really apply their knowledge and extend their answer to demonstrate their understanding. So think about when you're developing tests in general, what you really want students to do and how you really want them to show you that they understand and can apply what they've learned. So we always have the question of reliability and validity. Of course, the more fixed an answer is, the more likely it is to be reliable. Validity really depends on how much it really tests what you want them to demonstrate. It relates to the degree to which the collection of items on the test truly represents the breadth and depth of knowledge and skills to be learned in the tested subject. Does it fairly represent what has been learned? Does it truly represent what has been learned? Does the assessment match the instruction? Remember that they are intimately tied together. And use varied but valid item types, which is why we're making the test bank to start with. So validity, I'll look at the right side in the inset here. A degree a measuring procedure accurately reflects or assesses or captures the specific concept that the researcher is attempting to measure. Reliability and validity are not the same. Validity has to do with meaning and congruence. How reliability has to do to the extent a measuring procedure yields consistent results on repeated administration of the scale. So we talked about inter-rater reliability with the rubric, that if you give it to another person, will they get similar results to you given the same piece of student work? Things to consider for reliability are the directions and expectations clear? So in your traditional test items, please make sure to include directions. Do not assume I know what they are, and do not assume the students know what they are. Do the scoring rules show clear and meaningful distinctions between knowledge and skill? That was especially true for our rubrics. Are the scoring rules consistently applied? Not only inter-rater reliability, but does everybody get the same score based on the same answer? In other words, how can you avoid favoritism, bias, and so forth? How do the above elements provide a consistent level of generalization applicable to the content and to student skills? So that if I get this information, does that really show me how it applies to what the student has learned and their skills in using it and understanding it? General rule: if you're going to use pre-published assessments, which you will, always review the assessments provided by the publishers to ensure that they really do meet your learning objectives and goals and will give both you and the stakeholders meaningful information. You will find, especially in assessments that you don't create, that there will be much more information requested of the student than you may want or that you have covered. So you're going to have to do triage. You're going to have to pull items out that do not apply to what's been taught because you haven't gotten to that teaching. In some cases, you're going to need to give the students that assessment anyway because there's some kind of comparison that's being done that requires those items whether the students know them or not. So you just know that they may and may not. They're probably 50% chance of knowing it, 50% not. The other big question with assessments in general, and you'll find this true with standardized state testing in particular, is the difference between accommodations and modifications. And you think about this, fair isn't always equal. Accommodations are for people that have certain disabilities or certain situations. For example, if they're English language learners, they may get extended time. They may get to use a dictionary for their math. They may get to use a ruler. In math, an accommodation is using a ruler or a protractor and so forth. Things that are pretty obvious and relatively superficial, but that assist a person based on a particular category that they fit in. Modifications go deeper, and they're usually reserved for students that are receiving special education services. And modifications are different. So I'll read the slide. Accommodations provide different conditions for testing depending on student needs, assessment environment, directions, assistance, and other accommodations. Assistance might mean having somebody give them the word in a test in their native language. That's all they get to do, but that would be one way they can be assisted. Modification for students with IEPs, are for students that require modified learning objectives and who need to be assessed in a way that show whether they have learned those objectives. Those alternate assessments are very, very different from the regular standardized assessment, and in most testing situations you won't see that, although you may have students in your room that you need to make modifications for when you design your own tests. Accommodations do not generally affect the validity of the test scores. Again, you have to look at what is being taught and how it is being assessed. It's always that relationship. Feedback is always important. Students always want to know how they've done. So with any kind of content-based assessment, which you're going to be doing for math, reading, social studies, science, and so forth, the students and you as the teacher will use the feedback to improve skills, knowledge, and understanding of how the student did. You can help parents know how the students are doing relative to class goals and standards with the feedback on those assessments. They provide feedback with questions and information based on established criteria. So especially if there's a concern about a student, use the data. Use the data. People can argue it, but at least it's clear and you've got it. You've got it right there. And then have established criteria from which to provide feedback. Based on these criteria and the standards for this assessment, the student did this, he needs help or she needs help with this. So you find success, correct, reinforce, and remind them of their successes again. So I just like this cartoon, this poor dog. He goes, I'm going to need a little more specific feedback on my formative assessments. Bad dog does not give him any information, valid or reliable, about how he is as a dog. So we want to make sure that feedback is useful and valuable, value added. Sorry about that. So that's pretty much it for traditional test items. The Taylor and Nolan chapter will help you immensely, and the material in Module 11 will help you immensely in your reading, so please go over the Module 11 readings, materials, and visuals, videos, and so forth. So your task is to create 3 test items for each type of traditional test item based on the material from the module. Make sure they are directly aligned with your unit objectives. Have a peer or critical friend go over the test items with you to give you feedback. Please give the test to somebody, give the items to somebody, and let them say, I don't understand this. Let them say, what do you want here? Because that's how you're going to clarify your thinking as you're developing your tests. Complete the reflection on the traditional test items. I have this stated in the discussion forum, but I think that I have changed it to just be at the bottom of the traditional test item page instead of having to do another step. Just add your reflection to the bottom of that page. I'm not sure if I changed that or not. In preparation for your final UBD unit submission, highlight in red, please, and/or add the test items in red into the appropriate assessment and lesson sections. Submit your test item bank along with your test item and self-assessment checklist. There's a self-assessment checklist that you will check off to say you did. Each column refers to the same column on your template. Column 1, checklist for column 1 test items. Column 2, checklist for column 2 test items. Column 3, checklist for column 3 test items. And then submit your reflection on creating traditional test items to the discussion forum by the due date. I am going to put it in the discussion forum. So even if I didn't, I will. So it will be on the discussion forum. And many of you will say, oh, I need an example. And I will say, well, you've got one. I put an example, my partially done unit in as an example for you to look at. And I'm going to see if I can find another piece from another student's work that may also be of assistance to you. There is an example in the module for you to look at in terms of what number 4 expects. So then, now we're going to shift gears a little bit. This is a transitional piece between Module 11 and Module 12. You're going to be analyzing student work. And in order to do that, and I did remind you at the orientation that you will need to have a set of student work and or assessment data to use from a class, practicum class, a teacher you know, along with the student scores and the scoring criteria used for those scores. And then you're going to complete steps 1 through 4 on the ASW template, the Analysis of Student Work template. It is in Module 11, this template. Then you're going to prepare and post in the discussion forum, there's a place for it, 1, the student work or the test data, scores, and scoring criteria. You're just going to post it there. It's not going to be graded other than it's, you get a point for having submitted it. And 2, your analysis of student work template with steps 1 through 4 completed. So you look at the template, you read it over, you fill in the steps 1 through 4, and you post those to discussion forum before our meeting with the critical friends. And I have the schedule on the next slide, or on the slide from now. So when we meet with our critical friends, you're going to share your data, you're going to talk about how you analyzed it, and you're going to then finish step 5 on the analysis of student work at that meeting. So what does that look like? What you're going to submit on Monday, November 28th is your traditional test item bank, your self-evaluation checklist, and your traditional test item reflection. Why, you ask, are they going to be submitted on Monday? And you probably will then think, oh yeah, it's right after Thanksgiving. So instead of having you submit it on Friday as usual, submit it by Monday because it needs to be in at least before we have class on Monday. If you submit it Friday, I will pat you on the back. That will be fantastic. And then I can grade it earlier because I will probably be doing work Thanksgiving weekend. But because many of you probably want to take some time off, I thought it would be more appropriate for you to just have your assignment submitted to me on Monday instead. Analyzing student work, steps 1 through 4, along with accompanying student data, work, and scoring criteria will be due Sunday, November 27th. That's Thanksgiving weekend Sunday. And then online, we will meet on Monday, November 28th to do a peer review of the analysis of student work with your critical friends, not unlike what we did with peer review. And there will be a format for that. I'll have everything set up. So that's a required meeting, and we will be meeting that day to go over your analysis of student work. And then in Module 12, you will have completed the analysis of student work, steps 1 through 5, along with its reflection and along with a task called Reading and Using Standardized Test Data, which is part of Module 12. And all those are due December 2nd. So with that, this is the schedule. This is kind of an overlapping schedule, which is why I just wanted to go over this with you for this particular module. If you have any questions, you should let me know. There are examples in the module for you to look at least sketchy examples, enough to give you an idea of what needs to get done, because I want you to use your best professional judgment on how that's going to look, but there are certain elements that need to happen. Please make sure to look at the rubrics, because the rubrics will tell you what I'm looking for. And I know that you're all very good at asking questions if you need to. So with that, I look forward to your development of test items and looking at your analysis of student work. And with that, we'll talk to you in a week. Here's how it starts for Module 11. Your traditional test item bank and your self-evaluation checklist and your traditional test item reflection are all due